we'll get into the topic of today's discussion. So, well, the idea is to start on my side. I will start with a presentation with a general outlook of the landscape of how cross-innovation is supported through different programs and projects at the European level first, because, well, this is how the European Union functions. We have policy documents. We have, for instance, a new European agenda for culture, but the main, let's say, instrument is still funding programs, and we have a broad diversity and different angles through which cross-innovation with culture and creative industries is supported. So we'll have a look at this first, and then we'll go through some very rapidly flagship examples, or, like, let's say, famous cases around Europe, and then a little insights into a study we developed for the European Commission DG Grow now 2 years ago on collaboration between creative culture and creative industries and the rest of the economy, and some insights on framework conditions or incentives for cross-innovation to take place. And the idea of this session is that we can discuss afterwards. So I will try to keep as short as possible this presentation. I will not be exhaustive. That's also why I told you to put the links of your projects. I'm sure there are many things that we can learn from each other, and that, yeah, then we can discuss how do you relate to these findings, to these supports, or what's missing, what are the solutions or the opportunities that you are also discussing maybe within your own organization. So we'll do a little collective brainstorming, so that at the end of the session we can also deliver some recommendations, or have it all together on a little board, all our thoughts together for the organizers to take away. So I will start with the presentation. Here we go. So I think you can see my screen now. I'll put this in for screen. There we go. So, as I was saying in introduction, what's out there in terms of EU policy programs supporting cross-innovation, and where are we going? So I will start this overview with maybe the most obvious that you probably are very familiar with, which is Horizon 2020, which is the research and innovation programs. So this is one entry through which cross-sector collaboration, cross-innovation is supported, with this very famous flagship program that you probably you're also involved in, which is the STARTS program for science, technology, and the arts, supporting various residencies, for instance, and research at the verge of technology and the arts to innovate in companies, in science. So this is the program dedicated to innovation with at the verge of science, technology, and the arts, which started, I think, in 2015. And that is supported by Horizon 2020. So it's more practical, is less research oriented. Well, it's research and practice through residency programs, for instance. It's also, Horizon is also supporting research projects that are really looking at what the arts are bringing, for instance, in digital transformation. This is one project, this is one example. I've picked up this one because I'm personally involved in that project. So this arts formation, for instance, looks at how the arts have been integrated into enterprise, or have had a more critical look on the digital evolutions of society and the economy. So this is more of a research project, but there is art practice associated with this research project. Is just now developing. So the artistic residencies and the exhibition will take place next year. But this is another way of looking, maybe more with a critical, with a social science perspective on this arts and science, technology, industry collaboration. It's another way of looking at cross-innovation from Horizon 2020. Then moving on to totally different type of European programs. URBACT, you probably know, is the program for the urban agenda. So, well, as you know, cities and regions are very active in supporting culture in general. They are really hotspots of creativity in Europe. And the urban agenda and the urban policies and programs of the EU have also been supporting this cross-innovation aspects, for instance, through a project that was called Kreativ Spin that produced a smart guide, I think it was in 2014, on how the cultural and creative industries can help the rest of the economy to innovate through the concept of developing the concept of creative spillovers. So these are extracts from the smart guide. I can share the links later in the chat. So, well, this was a project with the cities of Bologna, I think Mons, so Bologna in Italy, Mons in Belgium, I think the city of Kortrijk as well in Belgium. I think there was Rotterdam involved too, Birmingham. Different urban centers across Europe supporting this idea of cross-innovation at the very city level. And we will find these cities have continued developing this kind of projects also at their own local level. From the urban to the regional, Interreg, I think I've heard some initiatives already when you were presenting yourselves. So Interreg Europe for trans-regional cooperation has been supporting cross-innovation, both through the aspect of supporting SMEs to develop and to be more competitive through integrating, for instance, creativity, creative services or design into their operations. So this is one example. Region Arts, which is supported by the Interreg Europe program, looks at how ICT and the arts can bridge together to innovate within companies. And they've also proposed, because now I think it's towards the end of the project, they've proposed a report on support measures and policies and examples of local programs supporting this matchmaking between the arts and culture and other sectors. So this is an interesting project. I'm giving you samples. There are more, of course, and so we can add on in the discussion later. This is another example supported still for SME competitiveness within Interreg Europe, how to integrate design services for innovation within companies. So they've also produced some interesting deliverables on how to do that. And then from a different perspective, more research and development and innovation at the regional level. This is another project supported by Interreg Europe that's called Urban Manufacturing, Urban M, and it's aimed at supporting those spaces for urban manufacturing, so fab labs, for instance, within cities, and how these spaces can become hotspots for innovation within the city. So the same time frame as the two others. I think now they are quite close to concluding the project, and so it could be interesting for you to have a look at their reports and deliverables. Moving to another side of the EU agenda and the EU, let's say, architecture, DG Grow, so it's for market, industries, SMEs. Somebody mentioned already the COSME program in their introductions. So yeah, this is another way of supporting cross-innovation in EU through these programs. So this is an example from the Worth partnership project that is targeting the fashion and design sectors and putting together enterprises together with creatives so that they can create more inclusive, more sustainable design and fashion projects. DG Grow has also been supporting a dialogue between creative industries and the rest of the industry, let's say. That was a dialogue that started last year, and now they are, I think, in the third round of this dialogue. So they've looked at how, well, they've looked at the benefits, let's say, or to understand, for the industry to understand what the creative industries have to bring in, for instance, to tackle challenges of digitization of industry, the fourth industrial revolution. They've looked at the skills that are needed. They've looked at the IP issues, so some of the topics that come together with cross innovation. So just moving on with a program that is, well, this specific program supporting the cultural and creative sectors, pardon me. So it's quite, I mean, lately that Creative Europe has been supporting cross-innovation, and it's still very at an early stage. So Creative Europe is made of three main strands. There's the strand for culture, the one for media, and the one which is cross-sectorial. And it's more focused on cross-sectoral collaboration still within the cultural and creative sectors. And now they are bringing in digital ICT so that the cultural and creative sectors are able to adapt to new market realities, new consumption patterns, etc. So it's still not the main program. I've put it there because it's an interesting development. There's been some dialogue following also the new European Agenda for Culture for this innovation labs, and how cross-sector collaboration can support the cultural and creative sectors in being in adapting to new market and social realities. So this is evolving, let's say, in progress. Somebody mentioned very quickly, somebody mentioned Erasmus Plus. So this is the education training program. So they're looking at skills. Interestingly, there was a call recently for the post-COVID recovery through Erasmus Plus, and how culture, creativity can support the social and the economic recovery of Europe. So this has been funding through Erasmus Plus. I think the project will start next year, and it's really considering that, culture and creative sectors have a role to play also for themselves, for the recovery of the sectors which have been really, really hardly hit by the COVID situation. So this is also another entry point through which the European policy is considering cross-innovation. And finally, something that is very recent and on which we have very little details yet, but it's interesting to mention, is the European Green Deal initiative, and especially the new European Bauhaus initiative that was mentioned by the European Commission President in September. So the idea is to make artists, engineers, architects, scientists work together to give a more concrete faces, and to embody this Green Deal idea. So how are these sectors collaborating to make the Green Deal really happen, integrating skills from cultural and creative industries and from other more engineering or science and technical skills. So this is very recent initiatives. It will be launched in two phases, the first one next year and then in 2023. I can give you more details on this if you're interested, but this is one way looking at the future of integrating in a more systemic way the arts and creativity into innovation for the wider society. So this is for the European perspective, very broadly, very rapidly, but I would like to keep some time for discussion, so I'll be brief, but if you have any question afterwards, I'd be pleased to answer. So how is it taking place locally? So, well, what we can observe in terms of policy making for creativity in culture and creative industries in general, and innovation, cross-innovation in particular, is that there is a lot to do with the local and the bottom-up initiatives. And what we've seen, what we can observe across Europe, is you have this specific urban, very often urban centers where you have initiatives developing, and then it makes also things move at the city and at the regional level. So, well, some flagship examples, but I mean, you're probably very familiar with them, so I'll go very rapidly. You recognize probably the Ars Electronica Center in Linz, Austria. So this is also an interesting initiative that, while Linz was European Capital of Culture, there's been a lot of investment at local level on this aspect of cross-innovation. And there's the center is an exhibition center. It's also a research lab, the Future Lab. They're involved in European project, of course. You probably know their festivals. So this has been growing from this initiative in relation with the Year of European Capital of Culture, which I think was 2009, if I'm not mistaken, but please correct me if I am. So this is another hotspot, or another place for cross-innovation, which is the IRCAM Center in France. So it's more focusing on music, but it's music and new technologies, and they're involved. They're part of the STARTS ecosystem, as Ars Electronica is actually. So this is another example. This is interesting. It's in the Netherlands. It's an initiative by CIC202, which is one of the organizations supporting creativity, the Ministry of Culture and the Ministry of Economy, together with a foundation. And what they've put together is a program to accelerate creative industries, to put them in contact with researchers from universities of more applied sciences and technologies, so that the creativity of creative companies and artists can really help tackling societal challenges. So CIC202, which is this organization, has an interesting view on how to support cross-innovation, really recognizing the role of cultural and creative industries for innovation in other sectors. So this is very recent, I think, this acceleration program. So another initiative interesting to look at. And finally, I think, well, you're probably very familiar with, the ZKM Center in Germany, also part of the STARTS ecosystem, focusing on new technologies. First it was more for connecting classical music with other new technologies, but it's evolved in a bigger center for transdisciplinary research. So, well, this is very, I mean, it's absolutely not exhaustive, and I really don't have the time to provide a very wide mapping, but what I wanted to say, there are these hotspots of innovation, cross-innovation across Europe, not limited to Western and Northern Europe. Sorry if my examples were a bit partial in that views, but you also have very interesting initiatives in Portugal, in Italy, in Greece. So it's maybe these ones are more established, but yeah, it's quite wider, let's say, movement across Europe, supported with funds from the European Union. What helps and what makes it easier? And I think this is maybe more interesting to discuss together. So just also checking the time. So this comes from a study we did for DigiGrow. At the time, we interviewed and we surveyed a number of organizations, enterprises, supporting organizations, and public authorities, and we asked them how they engage, and with whom, and why, etc. So we've seen that on the side of cultural and creative companies, on the left-hand side, just half, like a bit more than half of them do collaborate often or very often with other industries. We've seen that business support organization, a little bit less than half of them support this cross-sector collaboration, but on the side of public authorities, very few actually were doing it often or very often. The majority still was not very regular in or in the practice of supporting cross-sector collaboration. So we have looked at what helps, and we found that that brokerage and networking is key, with some international and local networks and facilitating organizations. This I'm going quick on, because then I think it's interesting to discuss in your experience what have been the key success factors, or what are the challenges, or what you're looking at to support cross innovation in your different organizations, in your different territories. Another support or incentives is, of course, the space element. I've spoken before about these centers, these labs, these spaces for experimentation, spaces to meet and network. Is very important to have a bit of a neutral space between culture and creative industries and other types of industries to meet and to experiment and prototype. Another key aspect, of course, is always funding and support. So that's the vast majority of the people we've interviewed consider that, of course, funding is key to collaborate, to be more comfortable collaborating with other industries, because, of course, there is a dimension of taking risk and research development and experimentation. So this is an absolutely fundamental aspect, of course. Another framework, let's say, condition is, of course, policy support. When this cross-innovation aspect is embedded in innovation strategies, or in cultural strategies, or in industrial strategies at local or regional level, that, of course, helps setting up all these things that we've seen before, the spaces, the funding, etc. So, well, it's interesting to see that, at least for the creative cultural part, now that we have more than 100 regions in Europe that are including culture and creative industries as part of their regional smart specialization strategies, so that they can also develop the EU funding, cohesion funding on this aspect. And finally, I think, yeah, that was a bit the point I didn't mention here about supportive ecosystem. Of course, education is another important aspect, with educating and developing skills that are integrating the arts, for instance, in math, in engineering, the STEAM aspect. So here we are. We have still half an hour for discussion. Sorry if I spoke very quickly. So I wanted to, maybe we can do a bit of a quick feedback, or how you relate to these findings, to what was presented, what's been your experience, and then we can maybe move on to something a bit more collective brainstorming. I've prepared a Miro board where we can put ideas together on what are the key success factors for cross-innovation policies, what are the challenges, what solutions we can bring. So that's the plan for the rest of the session. So yeah, I would like to open the discussion in a very open way. If you have things ideas to complement what's there, or to just bring in your experience or your challenges in this policy aspect on cross innovation. Just quickly, KIC stands for Knowledge Innovation Community, and that's a very good point. Thank you for mentioning that. So these knowledge and innovation communities are put forward by the European Institute, EIT is Innovation and Technology Institute. Now I'm confused, but I will research that very quickly. The idea is to put together businesses, research centers, universities for innovation. So there are different communities, knowledge and innovation communities, on different aspects, such as transport and mobility, energy, food, I think, health. And the plan for the coming years is to put together, indeed, a KIC on culture and creative industry. So if you ask the Commission at the moment, they are very evasive on the way they say, oh no, it's up to the consortium to decide the orientation of the KIC. So I think cross-innovation is definitely a very interesting aspect to put in there. The idea of the KIC is that the cultural and creative sector will be able to innovate, for the sector, within the sector, across the sector, and then to be in relation with other sectors, other KICs, For instance, there's a kick on digital, which I think makes much sense to collaborate with. So that's, let's say, an instrument of the innovation policy that is developing. Proper research comparing the results from different incubated SMEs, I'm not aware of. I think what we have across Europe is maybe more anecdotal, if you like, examples of success between a collaboration between an artist and companies that take place in these spaces. That, for instance, examples that I know, of course, Ars Electronica Future Lab is one. So they have researchers and they have artists that work together on some projects, like, for instance, I don't know, companies working with electrodes and EEG technologies, so measuring your brain waves, working with artists to come with a project that might be then also commercialized. So this kind of examples I have. Pan-European study showing like a comparative analysis, I don't, and that would be interesting to look further if there are some really business analysis. So yeah, it's more examples from here and there that we have success. For example, ClickNL is one of them as well, but not something systemic. If I had prepared a very simple framework for discussion in the 20 minutes that we have left on what could be in your experience, and I've pre-filled some of the post-its just for the sake of giving examples of what could be the success factors of a policy supporting cross-innovation, what stakeholders should be involved. Well, we can think about ministries, but I think somebody in the introduction talked about regional innovation development banks as well. That could be very interesting. Tools, what are the tools, what are the schemes that are out there, what you have put in place or what you're thinking of putting in place. I've just put here incubation as you were speaking. Now I'm just adding the question marks. What are the challenges and what solutions or recommendations could be put forward to overcome those challenges? So this is a proposal for the next 20 minutes. And if you want to continue discuss or had more questions on presentation or sharing your experience, this is also very welcome. So yeah, I think with my plan, I cannot enable you directly to put in your contribution, but if you just speak out, I will fill in. Yeah, Benoit, I think just raised hands. I think it's also a challenge maybe for sometimes to connect creative startups with other sector startups. We have sometimes communication issues, or we have to create the links between these networks and to embed the creative startups into the general startup ecosystem. Those of you who are working on regional policies, or what are the things you're putting in place, or what are your challenges, where are your points of hesitation? If you don't know where to start, that's already a good point of starting the discussion. Or I don't know what's the different experiences with actually supporting cross-innovation within your ecosystems, but even if you don't know where to start, that could be a good experience to share.